But welcome everybody to this month's Young Professional Series webinar. I'm Matthew Fox from CSI's Community Development Manager. And with me also, other staff member is Caitlin. Caitlin, if you want to say hi.
Hello, I'm Kate Solomon. I am CSI's Marketing and Membership Manager, and we're excited to welcome you to part 2 of 10 in CSI's Young Professional Series on the project team. If you're unfamiliar with this series, the basis behind these webinars is providing a basic knowledge of all aspects of the project delivery cycle. So in this project management team series, participants are going to be exposed to all aspects of the project delivery cycle, the team members, their responsibilities, and how they effectively communicate to get the job done on time and, of course, on budget. And today's webinar is Understanding the Architect, and we have a great panel assembled for you this afternoon.
As Caitlin had mentioned, we do have a few different individuals on the call. I'll do a small introduction to each of them as we get going, give each of them about 5 to 7 minutes to give their input as to their experiences into being an architect in the profession. And I'm going to actually put Chris on the clock here. So Chris Bowling, AIA, is an associate with K. Norman Berry Associates Architects, PLLC, in Louisville, Kentucky. He plays many roles in his current position, from drafting, rendering, hand and computer, designer, and project and client management. Chris has been active and held leadership positions in the American Institute of Architects at both the local and national levels. And at a personal level, I've known Chris now for going on 10 years, and I've actually taken his hand rendering courses, so I can vouch for his ability to make me look really bad as an artist. But with that, Chris, I'd love to invite you into the group today to give a few minutes to talk about your experiences in your growth as a professional in the architecture world. So Chris, over to you.
Well, thank you for having me with the CSI group here. It's really exciting. I've been in the profession now since '98. Lived both on the West Coast and residing here in Louisville, Kentucky. I've grown, taken my exams. I'm a registered architect, and the roles have changed for me throughout the years. But in general, what has been consistent is this kind of, we are the extension of the client's intentions. And what I mean by that is we listen very well to what the client wants, and then we start to interpret and play around with ideas and put them on paper. And then we work with consultants, which largely compose of interior designers, structural engineers, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, fire protection, landscape architects, civil engineers, and a slew of other specialty groups, from acoustical engineers to lighting engineers to real key focused sustainable or ecological engineers. So our job is to really be able to pull a team together, understand, and be able to convey all the different parts of a project in a very basic format to the client so they can make an informed and educated decision on the direction of their project, as well as be able to convey the intent from the owner back to the design team. So we've become this liaison. We're this bridge where we're connecting two sides. And that happens through, a long period of time during a project. Usually, depending on the size of the project, design period could last from as little as a couple months to as much as a year, where you're interacting and having that conversation. Throughout that sort of design period, we often reach out to specialists in the design field or in the supply field to understand their products, how they integrate with ours, and getting some ideas of cost and implementation, and then helping us write specifications. And then moving into the construction realm, we usually represent the owner. That is the construction administrator of the contract documents, which are legal documents. And we just make sure we don't test materials, we don't ensure things are put together correctly, but we do general observation and monitor the cost of the project and fill out pay applications to make sure the percentage of complete is correct. So we're not a testing agency. We don't verify the installation is correct, only that it meets building code and it's installed or the items are correct and comply with the contract documents. And through that time, too, we also still continue interaction with suppliers and making our products work. We found discrepancies. We're not perfect. We're doing a building for the first time and for the last time. And unless you're getting into cookie cutter, repetitive buildings, you're pretty much creating a new building every time you do it. So it's not like a car where it's been engineered to the nth degree. We are constantly redoing a building or doing a new building with new materials, with new expectations, with new goals, with a new client, with a new site, with new climate, with a bunch of new stuff. So it's always a challenge, and we're never perfect. Even though that we're experts in the field, our job is to do and minimize the discrepancies, really, is what it comes down to. So we get involved from the beginning to end and close out, and really holding the hand of the client and making sure that they get the product they want for the price that they want to pay. And that's a lot of what we do. We do, again, engage with all suppliers and material manufacturers to get the best materials in the project for the right price, depending on what the project allots for that. That's it in general.
Great. Well, I'm going to leave it at that for now. There are a couple questions leading from yours that I think we can tie in with the audience once we get to the other three guest speakers. So at this point, I am going to say thank you, Chris, and I am going to introduce our next speaker, David Shove Brown. AIA NCARB is a partner at Studio 3877, an architectural design, interiors, and graphics firm with offices in Washington, D.C., specializing in residential, single and multifamily, commercial, restaurant, and healthcare architecture and design. Studio 3877 has completed projects throughout the United States as well as Europe. Mr. Shove Brown holds a bachelor's degree in architecture and a bachelor's of science in architecture from Catholic University of America. Additionally, David's work has been featured in Details Magazine, The Washington Post, Washington Magazine, Hospitality Design Magazine, Boutique Design Magazine, and Form Magazine. David is a guest lecturer at Catholic University and has been honored with architectural awards from groups such as the American Collegiate Schools of Architecture, the AIA, and the WAF, and American Architecture Foundation, including the Weeb Award, WAF's Award for Architecture in the Public Interest. So David, and I hand it over to you to also give your 5 to 7 minutes about your experience in the architecture profession.
Everything that Chris said is dead on, and so I'll approach it from another perspective, which is the perspective of the small practitioner and starting a firm. We started Studio 3877 about 4 years ago with two of us idiots in my kitchen working alongside my infant daughter, my wife who worked out of the house, a nanny, and 2 dogs. And we've grown in that 4 years to our 9th person coming on in a couple of weeks. And the things that we constantly have to revisit at the office that, we didn't learn and we're learning by fire, all those elements of, directly related to projects in architecture, which are, building the client relationship, not just establishing it and selling a project, but selling the firm and establishing such a strong relationship that the client calls us for anything and everything. We're thinking about changing the carpet. Could you come out and look at the project? Oh, we're taking on another space. Could you come meet us there? That's our goal. Our goal isn't to do a one and done project. We want to do multiple projects, whether it's, start to establish a design criteria or start to build a relationship where we're doing, 6, 7, 8 projects a year with the same client. So learning that interpersonal and client relationship is something that's very much challenging, and it's a serious part of the business. Architecture is predominantly about sales, and not just selling your idea, but selling yourself and promoting what you do and how you do it, and the fact that you can do it well. But there's also the side aspects of that in the small practice, not just setting up an office and renting out space and getting a plotter and computers, but also hiring the right team members and when to hire them, understanding that sometimes we've made hires before we really needed them, but the right people were there in place and we needed to get them on board. Setting up all of those lovely things like health insurance and 401k, all those things that make your firm marketable to potential employees and team members. But, establishing a culture to an office and developing that culture so that you're doing good work and it's seamless. It's not a situation where there's, a pecking order and people are upset that this person has this title. Nobody in our office has a title except for, the two partners. Everybody else is, either an architect, interior designer, and that's okay. We want everybody to be a part of the team. Anybody can have a good idea. So those are the things that I've really been focusing over the last 4 years, and I think that I can contribute to this conversation.
David, with your experience as well being an educator, if you can give your experience of also how the transition from being a student of architecture to being an intern practicing architecture, if you can give any insight on that as I finish up some other key points you had mentioned here.
Absolutely. Well, there's a it seems nowadays on everything is a list, and I think there were the top 10 things that you didn't learn in architecture school on like Architizer, some websites. But one of them was, the fact that you learn in the field. And we spend so much time in design school talking about design, which is certainly important, but understanding really how things go together. And as Chris said, if it ever goes perfectly, retire, because that's how you should end your career, because it never does. And you have to react to things, and you have to be able to say, I don't know, but I'll find the answer. So making that jump and understanding that you have to be a sponge and absorb all of these things that you see in the field going on around you, that's sometimes a humbling thing, because you've spent all this time working as this designer, and you're designing these great things. But so that's a challenge. And the other thing that I see some people struggle with, depending on the program, is you're never going to be working on a project alone. There's always, so even if it's not another architect in your office, you're going to have a consultant. You're going to have some sort of team member that's going to be working with you on a project. So understanding those sorts of interpersonal relationships can be a challenge, especially coming from an architectural education background where, again, you're taking a project throughout a whole semester by yourself. Yeah, you're getting critique from a professor, but that ability to work within a team and establish, how decisions are made and when they're made and how production gets done, that can be a bit of a challenge too. I still teach a class every semester, and I certainly approach it from the professional practice aspect, even if it's a third-year design studio, just the mentality of everything cannot be a glass roof, and there are more materials than steel and concrete and glass and wood. So, how do you educate yourself? How do you continue to learn? And that, to me, is a very important aspect of architectural profession and education.
Great. I'll appreciate it. Again, David, some questions I think that we can fill into where you're talking about, but we're going to leave those to the second half of the webinar. So with that, I am going to ask if Andrew got his audio working. Andrew, can we hear you?
Here.
Perfect.
Right.
Andrew Malinowski, AIA Lead APDD plus C NCARB. Andrew Malinowski is an architect with Epstein Ewen Architects in my home city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where he specializes in corporate and technical healthcare projects. As an architect with EUA, Andy works to integrate technology and building science and is always looking for and utilizing new tools to aid in the design and construction of projects. He believes close collaboration with consultants and the trades are key factors to the success of a project. As a complement to his professional career, Andy is active in the profession with both past and active appointments to multiple committees at both the state and national level, representing the voice of architectural graduates, aspiring, and recently licensed architects. So Andrew, over to you with, I guess, the same introduction of 5 to 7 minutes about your experience in the profession.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Matthew, and thank you to CSI for having me today. I guess I'm approaching this from a little different aspect than the two former colleagues. I'm more recently have entered the profession. I graduated in 2009 and was licensed about 2 years ago. So while I don't have the years and years of experience, I have been an architect for a while and do have some multiple projects under my belt. And looking at it from the recently licensed individual, I think the thing that has stood out to me the most was the interaction with multiple people, as David mentioned previously. You're really not working in a silo as you typically do in architecture school. You're working with multiple people multiple times across multiple projects at any given time. So it's really, the architect serves as a big manager during the design and construction process, and the owner trusts us as an architect to have the knowledge and the skills and things to do our job correctly and execute their vision for their project the way they want it to be done. But we also have to recognize where we need help. So hiring consultants where applicable, mechanical, structural, specialty consultants for acoustical or whatnot. But we really never do sit on our hands. It's always interacting with somebody, and it requires a little bit of knowledge of everything. So working with consultants, challenging them to maybe push the boundaries where applicable, going, hey, I know this is the way you always do it, but can we do it possibly a different way this time? Or we have this something special going on. What do you think about doing it this way? So it's always looking out for the owner's best interests at the end, and the execution of a successful project, which is ultimately what everybody needs to do. But the communication, both with the owner and all these consultants and all the applicable parties in the project, is really an important part of everything. It's a profession of constant learning. So every project you learn something new. Mistake happens, whether intentional or not. It usually always does. So kind of as David was saying, if it goes perfectly, it's probably a one-off and get out while you still can. But it's great that it's constantly learning because it never stops. What you learn on one project, you carry on to the next project, and this happened to me. And you talk to your peers, other architects, and they say, this happened. So you make sure it doesn't happen again. So you really, as an architect, we have to sell ourselves and our ideas. The owner hires us because they recognize us as experts in architecture and the building and someone they want to execute their project and what they want to do. As far as interactions, like I mentioned, we work with engineers, work with the contractors and subcontractors a lot, usually mainly with the main contractor. But it's not just produce the drawings, hand it to them, walk away, show up at the end and make sure it was done correctly. It's a constant conversation throughout the whole process to make sure they understand the design intent and what they're supposed to do and any maybe particular variables. So it's not just the set of drawings. It's really important to keep having that conversation throughout the whole time. And that could be site visits with the contractor or even with the owner. Owners love walking through their new spaces. They always get a big smile on their face as they see the walls going up and maybe the finishes going in and seeing that they'll be moving in there soon. They really always like that. And it's very gratifying from the architecture point of view to see that appreciation they have for all the hard work, long hours, everything else that we've done toward that completion of the project, that they're happy with the product that they're getting. We work with specifiers a lot, making sure that the specifications going along with the drawings that we do match what we hope or match what we intend for them to be. So the right products are listed, the right terminology. If, for example, it's a lead project, terminology is very important for products and procedures and whatnot. So we work very closely with the people writing the specifications or even do it ourselves to make sure it's in there. And then facility managers as well, understanding what they have in place in terms of existing facilities or procedures or ideas like that to make sure that what we do for a new project will fit in with their current ways that they do it and make sure the project will work for them and not be something new out of the box. Because if they've been doing it for a long period of time, you want to make sure that you continue to do it the same way for them and make their lives easier, because then you'll get that callback when they want to do something nice. So it's really all about the relationship and cultivating that relationship and keeping it active throughout the whole time.
Great, thank you. And again, we do have some questions popping up as we speak here that we'll hold off to the second half of the session, but I did want to get our last guest speaker in here. Shannon Peterson AIA is an associate and project manager at CTA Architects Engineers headquarters office in Billings, Montana. Shannon specializes in commercial projects with a focus on the design and construction of financial institutions. Shannon has gained her LEED AP BD plus C credential and has completed LEED Platinum and Gold certified projects. She also holds an NCARB certificate. Shannon is also currently a Young Architect Region Director for the AIA Northwest and Pacific Region. She also served on NCARB's 2014 Internship Advisory Committee and is currently serving on NCARB's 2015 Education Committee. But again, if you can give us your 5 to 7 minute breakdown of your experience so far as being an architect in the profession, we can go from there.
Okay, thanks for having me. I'm glad to join the call. It's great to hear what Chris and David and Andy have talked about, all taking a little bit different approaches and, focusing on our relationship with the owner. I'll try to spin it a little bit different way. Like Andy, I'm a more recently licensed architect. Emerging professional is the term that AIA uses. I graduated in 2006 and became licensed in 2010. And I think a different aspect of where I work is I work at an architecture and engineering firm. So a lot of times our consultants, structural, mechanical, electrical engineers, landscape architects, civil engineers, interior designers, are all in our office, which is great for being able to collaborate across those disciplines on projects. We, of course, bring in specialty consultants like acoustic consultants or kitchen consultants for different projects. But we really have a collaborative approach. I think that's one thing that was really important as I was beginning my career, was having those people that you could go to for questions and ask them when you're having a question about an engineering system, is being able to talk to them, talk to those consultants, and get a better understanding. I think a lot of times young professionals, you might not be sure where you're at, or I always heard there's no dumb questions, and I think that's true. Is asking those questions helps you get a better understanding of what's going on, and whether that's the design intent, what the owner wants to do, the question from contractors, but really helps you to gain knowledge and advance your career. Another relationship that's really important is with contractors. In architecture school and starting out, you're in the office a lot or working on projects and not getting out and seeing how what you draw and what you specify actually gets materialized into a project or a building for an owner. So being able to get a contractor, even we do a lot of projects where we use a construction manager at risk that's the general contractor as well. But we get them on board early and are able to all be a team and work through issues. It's the communication with the project manager for the general contractor, their on-site superintendent, and even communication with subcontractors. Really, really helps. When you draw something sitting in the office and then you get out in the field and see how a detail really goes together, or if there's a better way to do it, identifying those early. I think like David said, or maybe it was Chris actually, it's impossible to do the perfect project. And so, you got to remind owners that, because they're a lot of times expecting you to be perfect, and that doesn't always exist. So having those good relationships with contractors and with your engineers, because you are going to run into issues in the field, and how you can resolve them is really important. Of course, we work a lot with suppliers and facility managers and other people on the building team, especially suppliers. We have a lot of people coming into the office, which is great, because then you're able to use their technical resources. It's great to explore different materials, and you're not always using the same thing on projects. And what's the best way to put it together, and what's the best way to detail it is really important. That's part of that, making sure you're putting it together correctly so you're running into less issues in the field. And especially starting out, you might not have that knowledge as an architect, but using those resources around you to get the best project. I think everyone else covered a lot of what I was thinking about. I think the main things are just to ask a lot of questions, use the resources that are available to you. And I always tell emerging professionals, to be empowered, be active, have a bias for action, take advantage of every opportunity that's in front of you.
Great. If there's anything else you'd like to add in the specifics, I think you did a great job of kind of wrapping up everybody else before you as well, to give kind of a good understanding of where our 4 different speakers are coming from. So with that, if there's anything else, Shannon, you'd like to add, or else I am going to unmute all of our speakers here, as we do have a few questions that can start coming in. And for those in the audience, this is the time where if you have any ideas or questions or comments you'd like to add, feel free to add those into the question box or to click the raise your hand button so that we can see those requests to unmute your line, and we can help you out in getting connected with the group. We did have one question from the audience, and I'm going to hold off on just a second because I think there's a way we can potentially tie in the 4 of you here and kind of get your input on something. For those that may have attended last month's last session, I guess, back in September on understanding the owner, we heard as the kind of the starting point of a project, the owner's intent to a project, and then working with their project manager or property manager to start that process with the architect and the rest of the project team. I'd love your point of view from each of you 4, and we're going to go in opposite order because Shannon, you're already unmuted. I'll start with you. Any experiences you have with working with an owner or working with a property manager that you think would be insightful, or that you have any one really good story or even a horror story that we can share? If it's a horror story, obviously use a fake name so we don't get you in trouble. That might be a good experience to pass on to the audience. So Shannon, anything you have an experience with an owner or a property manager?
I don't know if I have something specific. I know one thing we try to do is always get a clear understanding of what their goals are for the project. If you can have defined goals for a project from the owner that you can communicate with not only your consultants, engineers, suppliers, contractors, it helps to see the project all the way through and at the end know that it's what they wanted. So coming away, whether we get together with a visioning charrette and a brainstorming what they all want to see, and then come out of those with specific defined goals.
Well, I think who the owner is on a project can vary the outcome of the project or the way the project proceeds quite greatly. Owners, direct owner, somebody who is going to own and occupy the building, has a very different perspective on what they want in the long-term outcome than, say, a property manager or just a broker or a real estate individual. The owner who will be in the building will care about that 50, 60-year building and finish his last date and the durability and maintenance schedules and everything like that, and they will most likely spend that extra dime to give themselves a bigger benefit in the long run, whereas working with just a property manager, a real estate broker, or somebody like that who just wants to lease the space out, they want to build the building, for, I guess, as low cost as they possibly can, and then turn around and lease that space out to kind of maximize their long-term profits. And they don't necessarily want to do those additional ads that may add just a little bit of cost to a project, but a very large, long-term value. So I think who the owner is or who is hiring you to design and build that building has a very large outcome on what the final product is and how the project proceeds.
Right, this is Chris. We often work with facility managers and property managers on a multitude of projects, and it's really key to understand who their boss is. For an example, I manage a Fortune 500 client, and I'm interacting with their property manager on a weekly basis, but they're getting direction from the CEO, which I don't have direct interface with. So I've got to really try to listen, try to read between the lines, but also I have to try to make them look good. Because they're the ones who came to me for the job. They're the ones who are looking to me for answers. And if I make good decisions or advise them well, then they look good in front of their boss. And that's really good relationship building, because they will constantly pull you into their projects because you've given them the right answer, you're giving them the right product at the end, and they're looking fantastic in front of the board or the CEO. So that's one thing that's really key, because there's so many layers that we have to go through. And in dealing directly with someone at the top of the food chain, they have not always understand exactly what they want. They don't understand construction, because this could be their very first endeavor into building. And so there is a lot of hand-holding. And at the same time, you're also dealing with potential egos. So not only you can't baby them, but you also have to learn how to interact with them and build a relationship that is respectful. So you're advising them. You're kind of giving the lifetime cost of, if you're going to do one system via another, this costs more upfront. This one will have a better payback period over time. It'll be more maintenance free, et cetera. So you've got to be able to learn how to tenor your discussions and relationships in order to be, we always want to have a repeat client. And that's what our firm is really keen on, is relationship building. So you always really have to learn how to interact with someone at different levels of power, and they're the ones providing you with the project and providing you with the payment. So there's a lot of management, and managing expectations is really what we do a lot.
All right, we have an interesting comment on Twitter I'd like you guys to weigh in on. Many of you during your session talked about how learning in the field is key. And there was a comment that said the opportunities can depend on the employer. So do you all have any advice for either young professionals or interns or students that are just transitioning in to how to really get active and, as Shannon said, empower yourselves to take charge in your firm or really get involved to get that on-the-job learning experience?
I'm going to jump in and speak up and give the advice to jump in and speak up. This is Dave Show Brown. I firmly believe that you need to have I just came from a lunch where we were talking about communication, and that ability to communicate is not something that, again, people learn. You have to practice, and you have to learn. And it's something where coming on to a firm, a young architect and designer needs to sit down with their supervisor, whoever it may be, and say, look, one, I've got to complete IDP hours and things of that sort, but two, I need to get this experience because it's only going to benefit the firm in the long run. So you're going to learn, the firm's going to gain some more experience, so it's a good thing, but you've got to be able to speak up and understand. Sometimes you've got to detail a bathroom floor drain, but sometimes you've got to get out in the field and you've got to see how things are built.
Yeah, this is Shannon. That's a good point. I think that speaking up and asking, if you hear something, there's a construction, someone's going out to a site visit, asking and saying, hey, I heard you're going, can I go? Can I do the field report, or can I do meeting minutes? Can I go with you to a client meeting? Providing some value is a good way to get your foot in the door to being able to go do those things. And saying that expressing some interest. Usually if you're interested in doing something, they're going to be more than willing to show you, mentor you, and help you along the way.
This is Chris. I think a big thing is showing initiative, and everybody who's an emerging professional comes to the table with different personalities. Some are type A, and they're always going to be the aggressors and jump in and be taking initiative. But then there's always the more that are more reserved. They're the quiet ones. And it's a little bit more difficult for them to be noticed and to grab a hold of things. But what those people, I think, really need to focus on is what their skill set is, and try to break the mold that they're uncomfortable with. If they're uncomfortable in situations, is to push that boundary, because the opportunities, you almost have to go and grab them. They're not necessarily always going to present themselves to you. And I found this book, I'm going to quote here, is a really great book, and Matt, I believe, has met her as well. There's a great book out by Grace Kim. She's an architect, and it's called The Survival Guide to Architectural Internship and Career Development. And what's really key in that book is it covers everything from graduating grad school all the way up to negotiations and your sign-on contracts, et cetera. But if you got to, before getting the job and in the interview process, you have got to start to learn about what firm that you're potentially going to get a job with. How do they interact? Ask them questions about internship. Ask them questions about how they interact with the interns? Are you stuck at a desk? Are you out in the field? That is really key. And also trying to find a really good mentor, someone in a ladder effect, someone who's just above you a couple years, someone who's maybe 5-10 years above that person, and then someone who has like 30 plus years. And so, because they all have different experiences, and having that sort of mentor group to go to is very key to learning how you navigate the field.
And that mentorship doesn't stop. I mean, we've got, even, being 20 years in the firm or in the field, we still have mentors. So it's something that you establish and you continue on. It's not just for your internship.
Right.
Yeah, being a young professional you are your own biggest advocate. So if you have to stand up and take the initiative, just I guess to repeat everything everybody else has said, but also if I could put a plug out there for the IDP, the Internship Development Program managed by NCARB, that is a required amount of hours in a whole bunch of different areas that an architect or aspiring architect needs to complete as part of getting their license. And you may look at that and go, oh, I need 120 hours doing specifications, but you also, that means you need 120 hours doing specifications. When I started doing that, I was reading a spec book over the lunch hour to kind of get an understanding of what it was, how it was formatted, the type of stuff it talked about, and eventually after doing that a little bit, I was able to say, hey, can I help you maybe write that section, or I read this over here, what does that mean? Can we put that in there? Or was this a typo or something like that? So taking the initiative and stepping up and taking the opportunities when they come to fruition is very important. Nobody's going to hand it to you. Nobody entered the world knowing everything about architecture. We all had to learn it somewhere. So you just have to make sure that you learn it. And when the opportunity comes up, make sure you seize it.
Great. I'm going to interject actually with the next question. Is originally addressed towards David, but I think with what we just talked about, it actually can be handled by all of you. So hopefully you can see the question up here. What was the biggest obstacle to starting your own firm? And from a liability standpoint, do you find yourself becoming part of all your employees' projects in order to minimize potential errors? So David, to you directly, and then to the rest of the audience, as people that have worked their way up or are currently working their way up the industry, how do you handle that, potential trust factor between the partner of a firm and, being given those projects once you finally step out of the shadows and ask for more responsibility?
Actually, I find, yes, there was that initial fear of sort of letting go things, but I actually find that we get better projects and better team members by me getting the hell out of the way and saying, yeah, you know what, you want me to help with a critique, or you want me to walk you through a detail? That's great. I'd be happy to do that. But if we empower our team members to go and take a project from start to finish, they're into it. It's something where, they want to do the best possible job. If it's somebody dictating how it's going to look and how it's going to perform, then they just become draftspeople, and that doesn't solve anything. So we need to empower them to make decisions. In terms of the biggest, we certainly look over the drawing. That goes without saying, but I don't need to micromanage everyone. In terms of the biggest challenge of starting the firm, everything becomes a little bit of a challenge. Signing your first lease, signing your first employee on, or signing on for a 401k program. It's all a challenge, but you have to keep it in perspective. And my constant line to everyone is, we're not curing cancer. We're building buildings, and we're hopefully doing it right, but we're learning along the way. And someone else had mentioned that we're managing expectations. Well, we're trying to do that within the firm, outside the firm. So as long as you're communicating well with your business partner or your colleagues or your spouse about everything, you can generally work through it, and it's not necessarily a life or death situation.
Yeah, this is Chris. My experience, I've worked at several different firms, and I've been at my current firm for, over 11 years now. And every firm has its own kind of personality, and the people who run it can change their personality over time. and they can grow, and that's just part of learning over it. So in my experience, building the trust, because, I did come in as an intern, taking my exams back in '03, just out of grad school. So I had to show them that I could do the work, and I had to show them I had initiative, and I had to show them I take responsibility, and I show them that if I made a mistake, I owned up to it and I can resolve it. And it was, for my experience, it was that constant proving to them that has allowed me to grow in the firm. And so, I'm at a point now, I just check in, I kind of brief them what's going on, if there's any issues, what those issues are, and then they come to me for advice. So you over time, and every firm is different, and every part of the country is different where that firm exists. So in my experience here, is over time you build that relationship and you build that trust, and that's the whole background of those situations where they see your trials and tribulations, and they see how you handle it, and they see how well you've grown out of it or dealt with it and resolved it, and that's where you have these sort of growth patterns. And it's vice versa, because they'll rely on you just because you might be up to date on the current code or the current green sustainability count or whatnot, and they're going to come to you. So you have this nice dialogue, and it just builds over time in the experience I've had, and it's different with everyone.
Another question for the speakers on the line, and it's a question about how to prioritize which consultants you really partner on with a project. And they want to know kind of your preferred form of contact. Do you do phone calls, strictly emails? How do you really go about forming that relationship?
This is Shannon. I guess since we work with a lot of our internal consultants, we do a lot of things face-to-face. Consultants we're working with that aren't in our office, we do a lot of, face-to-face meetings or phone calls or email. But, just gaining the trust of those that we work with.
This is Andy.
This is Dave. I think it varies from, job to job and consultant to consultant how you interact. I think that certainly some things you can handle on an email, but other things you want to sit around the same drawing and look at the challenges and find the solutions. Sometimes it's a phone call, sometimes it's a site visit. Certainly I'm all for a quick email to just check in or something of that sort, but I think face-to-face and being able to get around the table is very important.
This is Chris. We use varying amounts of consultants, and every consultant we use have a different sort of specialty. So, and what I mean by that is, for instance, structural. There's probably 4 or 5 structural engineers we'll use, but each one of them, even though they do structural engineering, all have sort of a scalability to their scope of work. Like one is sort of like a sole practitioner, so we're going to pull him in for smaller projects, non-very complex projects. But when we get to a complex project, something larger, then we'll pull in a different firm. And same with MEP. We have one that really kind of likes to work on jurisdictional or government-type projects where it's here's the scope, here's the end product, while there's another MEP that's very nimble and can really produce well under design-build circumstances. So it really depends on what the scope of the work is, the scale of the project, and what consultant will be the right fit for the team to get the end product.
All right, I'm going to tie in another question here. This is going to be the last one from the audience, and then we have one that'll kind of wrap up the session. But last question here for you all, as it relates to actually from the point of view of somebody on the call that is not an architect. But do you have any advice for new manufacturers representatives, do's and don'ts as it pertains to interaction with the architect design team? Whether it be the lunch and learns or the cold calls or the dropping off material or even working at, expos, at conventions. Any experience you have between your interaction as an architect design side of the world and those individuals trying to inform you about the products that they represent?
Well, I'll jump in. This is Chris. It varies. We've got a few manufacturer representatives that work, and they rep many different products. And one in particular I'm thinking of, he's a very pushy individual and is always trying to push the products that he reps to me. And so even though his products might not be of what I'm looking for, he'll act like it is. and that doesn't help my relationship with them, and that it kind of is vexing at times. So I would not recommend that. But I think what the key thing here to take away is that the manufacturer representative needs to come and visit the people in their region, the firms in their region, to learn and get to know the people and then learn how to communicate with them. Because it's not a blanket approach, because everybody has a different personality. People have different amount of time to allot to that person. So it's just that, hey, let's get familiar with this. I'm in town. Do you have a moment? I know I can take 5-10 minutes of your time, because it's not a billable amount of time that they're still spending. So to be really respectful of the time, get in with the lunch and learn. We do a lot of those, because we get a trade-off. We get to learn about a manufactured product, and we get a continuing education, which is required for our state registration and for AIA. So there's sort of like a plus there. And it gives time to do some interaction. Just a surprise visit doesn't necessarily work, because we're typically busy running out the door on a conference call, trying to get a deadline. So always plan ahead, reach out, and just be very cognizant of time and respectful of time is what I'd recommend.
Yeah, I agree with this. This is Shannon, about don't drop in. A lot of times we'll say, oh, is someone available? Well, do you have a scheduled appointment with someone? That's really helpful. The other thing is, if you're going to a firm, go on their website or find them on Facebook and find out what they're working on. Check out what types of projects. Have a little bit of background information before you show up at the office, because what you're working on may or may not, or what your product may or may not tie into projects they're working on, or find out where it might be useful.
This is Dave, and I'm sitting here smiling because I can't tell if we're talking about manufacturers, reps, or potential employees, because all of these things go for both of these categories. Cold calls are not the way to go. Find out who you need to talk to. So if you're a manufacturer's rep, figure out who's making those decisions. So don't send a bunch of random literature to whom it may concern, or to same thing with a resume, because it's going to end up in the same garbage can. Dropping in drives me insane, because saying, you're working, you've got things going on. I'm much better off if you schedule, even if it's a 10-minute coffee or something, to get in front of me or somebody. It's more efficient than coming in and sort of breaking the rhythm of what's going on. I'm sort of hot and cold on the lunch and learns. As from my perspective, when I was a younger architect, it was awesome, because you did all those things. You got to learn. You got your continuing education, and you got a ham and cheese sandwich, and it was fantastic. Now as a partner, I just finding an hour to carve out is really challenging. So those are the things that I generally will drop in and out of. So I do much better when it's 10 or 15 minutes, and you can tell me about a new product. That's interesting. I completely agree with Shannon, and figure out what we're working on. Understand the products we need and the products we specify, the types of work that we're doing. That's so important. But coming in and just saying, hey, look, I've got this new product, great, thanks. You've just killed 15 minutes of my day.
Thank you, David. We're actually going to wrap it up with the very last question here. I want to ask everybody one sentence or one piece of advice on tying into next month's session now, because the first session was on owners. This one is on architects. The next session is on engineers. So each of you, and I'm going to go down the order we started. So Chris, then David, then Andrew, and finally Shannon, also because you work at a dual firm. How do you all work with engineers? The other half of the quote-unquote AE side of the project team. So Chris, David, then Andrew, and finally Shannon, if you can give one sentence or one quick thing as to how you work with them, or a suggestion of how to work with them, and then we'll tie into the wrap-up of today's session.
Sure. Again, this is Chris. It is partnership. It's a team effort. When David said earlier about students in school and it's about your own project, and in the real world it's collaborative. I was just, before this conference call, I was in a day-and-a-half meeting with people, a design team from San Francisco, an ecological engineer, the client, many different people, and we were throwing out ideas about how to make this building efficient and ecological and then microclimate and biomimicry, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not an expert, and I'm hiring these people to help me make good decisions. And as well, they're listening to me because I'm deriving the design of the building to some degree with their input and back and forth, and it's so collaborative. There's not really a me anymore in architectural design. So our approach with consultants, especially engineers, is that they are a needed asset, an important asset to the team, and we work together as a team.
Yeah, and I'll follow that comment perfectly with the comment was perfect. The follow-up, probably not so much, but it's communication. It is all about communication. So, we don't meet with a potential client and have them tell us what they want their building space, whatever, to look like. We want to help them solve that. So I don't want to sit down with a structural engineer and tell them what the structure is going to be and how it's going to work. That's their expertise. But we do want to sit down and say, okay, what are the goals of the project? What are we trying to accomplish? What are we, yes, what's the schedule, what's the cost, but, what are we all trying to do? And that's going to build a much, much stronger relationship than me just handing off a set of drawings and say, okay, put some structure in here, and we'll then give it to the MEP and have them put some equipment in. You've got to have communication.
This is Andrew. I'll jump right in. I think forward two panelists hit pretty much all the nails on the head. When I go out and hire consultants and engineers, I'm doing it because I need their expertise, and I'm hiring them because I recognize and I recognize that they know what they're talking about, and I count on them for bringing new ideas to the table or challenging the status quo or utilizing a new product or telling me if something doesn't work, structural MEP-wise, anything like that. So when I'm hiring them, I want them to be an engineer. I'm not looking to tell them how to do their jobs. I want them to utilize their expertise and do it the best way that it can be done to produce the best outcome for the owner.
And I wrote this quick couple sentences down. Get your engineers involved early, clearly communicate the design intent and the project or owner goals, and actively listen. Be good partners on projects.
Great. I think that's a great summary and wrap-up. So as we go to the last slide, Caitlin, I know you'd like to talk to the audience just a little bit.
Remember, you can continue the conversation on our LinkedIn group. We've had some conversations that took place today, such as mentors that already have discussions up, or feel free to post discussions if you want to continue that conversation. If you have any questions about this series, feel free to contact myself or Mr. Fox, who is wonderful as our moderator today. Thank you, Matt. And those are our email addresses, and of course, we're both on Twitter. You can follow me at Caitlin Solomon 3, and you can follow Matt at mfoxcsi. And with that, Matt, if you want to talk to everyone so they can get excited for November's webinar.
Sure thing. So as you see here on the screen, next month, as we are trying to do these monthly, we will wrap up with the, or I guess take off from where we just wrapped up today's session by inviting some engineers to come talk to you all again and start figuring out what is that other half of the AE portion that is always referenced in materials and in textbooks, but also start to remove some of those stigmas of the assumption that an engineer is the person with the calculator or just doing the calculations, but what is their actual role in the end-to-end project team, and how perhaps you may have not thought to work with them if you're not part of the traditional AE side of the project team. So maybe those questions from today on product reps and with finding consultants will be questions we'll bring back next month as well. And lastly, I just want to thank again our speakers for today, Chris, David, Andrew, and Shannon. We really appreciate your insight and look forward to hopefully maybe working with you on any additional questions that might come in after today's session. So again, Chris, David, Andrew, Shannon, and also to my coworker Caitlin, thank you, and to our audience. And we look forward to seeing you next month as we talk to engineers and start to again understand another part of the project team.